the complete destabilization of reality that allows the Digimon to enter the human world. Even if the show finds something that doesn't have to do with control spires, it still has to revolve around Ken, like with the Dark Spores. Because the Dark Spores are all part of Oikawa's master plan, and Ken has the only Dark Spore that he can use. So he needs Ken, and they steal him, and then they go on a citywide car chase. Okay, now I hate the Dark Spores for a couple reasons. One, because the story about how Ken gets the Dark Spores completely destroys almost all the continuity that was set up in Tamers. Because Rio is here, he teams up with Ken, and this Rio is the same Rio as that Rio, which means these two, you know what? I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna save this for when we eventually get to Tamers, because I've already talked so much about Rio, I'm not sure if I'll have anything to talk about when I finally get to his section in Tamers. So, why else do I hate the Dark Spores? I guess it's just another reason to make Ken the center of attention once again, now that all the control spires, I think, were wiped out during that whole travel around the world plot, because that's what they were doing. But now we're focusing on Dark Spores, and now Ken is the only person that has Dark Spores. I just feel like this didn't have to be Ken. Like, I like Ken and all, but I'm really getting tired of seeing him in the forefront. I'm not sure if I made that clear or not. But he's the center of attention in the first arc because he's the main villain. In the second arc, he's the center of attention because the whole thing is mostly focused on trying to get him to join the group. And when he does join the group, then it's about trying to get him to warm up to the group. And it's also about fighting Arukenimon, because Arukenimon is the one who manipulated Ken when he was a small child into doing all these things. And then they focus on fighting Black War Greymon, who Ken is kind of the father of, because it was his control spire mixing with Arukenimon's hair, which I guess would make Arukenimon the mother of Black War Greymon, and Ken the father. But then, does that make the hair the sperm and the dark control spire the egg? And then they no, I'm not thinking about this. And then they meet Oikawa, who implies that he's been planning every event up until this point since the day Sam died. And that's how Ken is personally connected to Oikawa. Because Oikawa saw Ken at his brother's funeral and said, I have a plan, and sent him some emails, and I'll get into this more when we talk about Oikawa. Once again, I think it's really cool that Ken has all these personal connections to the villains, but I can't stress this enough. I keep thinking, well, if he has all these personal connections, I wish other people did too. Now, granted, I feel like the show kind of realized how ridiculous it was that Ken had personal connections to all these villains, and nobody else did, so they try to offset it a little bit by making Cody also have a big personal connection to Oikawa. And you know what? That was really cool, and I wanted to see more people in the group have that sort of relationship. And you'd think Oikawa would be a pretty good vehicle for this, because he said that he personally investigated the Heightened View Terrace incident. And you have two kids in the group that were parts of the Heightened View Terrace incident. You would think this would lead to some type of confrontation between him, Kari, and TK, but no. I was actually thinking about it. I think Kari could have easily replaced Ken in that whole kidnapping situation. I mean, Oikawa wants a Dark Spore, so why not just say Kari got a Dark Spore when she got sucked into the Dark World? Like, say she got it when this guy grabbed her arm and, like, injected it into her arm. And that the original Dark Spore that was in Ken got expelled when he was defeated when he was the Digimon Emperor. Just have Oikawa pull up and is like, ah, Miss Kamiya, I know all about you from my investigation in the Heightened View Terror incident. My magic cereal box scanner tells me that you have a Dark Spore. It is fresh, young, and can be easily extracted. Now, if you wish no harm to come to these children, I suggest you hop into the back of my van and we go for a little ride. This would have also made sense because there is kind of a personal connection between her and Oikawa, because Oikawa is being possessed by Myotismon, and Myotismon probably has the biggest axe to grind against Kari compared to any other kid in the group. So it might have been pretty cool to see like Myotismon try to incorporate Kari into his evil plans as some type of revenge against her or something. They could have done something with that. But no, Ken has to be the focus because Ken is the most important kid in the whole universe, and Ken is the reason that anything happens in this show. And he's so important that the show has a reality jumping demon that's sole purpose of the show is just to try to get him. Oh, wait. I'm trying to remember what else happened in the show that involved Ken. I don't think anything else happened and specifically involving Ken after that point. I mean, he defeated Daemon and like got over his trauma, except we learned in the finale that he didn't get over it. And the rest of the character stuff after this is just almost solely Cody and Black War Greymon. So I guess the last thing I could talk about before moving on to Wormmon is why I thought Cody would be the better choice to be Ken's fusion partner than Davis. And I know why they chose Davis to be his partner, because Davis was the only kid in the group who was really gung-ho about bringing Ken into the group. But I felt like Cody, who was the most resilient to Ken joining the group, becoming Ken's fusion partner would have made for a much better character-driven arc or story. Because you've got one kid who is on a path of redemption and another kid who does not believe redemption for his actions are possible. And all of a sudden now they have to, quote, have their hearts beat as one. They have to find a common ground, and basically Cody has to accept Ken in the group in order to fuse and probably save the day. But really, I'm just tired of talking about Ken. I feel like I've talked about him for like a half hour or something. So, we're gonna now talk about Wormmon and then finish up here, because I love Wormmon. Wormmon is probably my favorite Digimon of this season. I like his design, like with his colors. I think they go pretty well together. I just think he also looks really adorable. And he's got probably the coolest champion evolution of this season. And it's not just a bigger version of him. It looks like a completely different creature. He's got that cool purple laser sword. But anyway, I also like him because he's mismatched with Ken, at least in the beginning. But not comedically mismatched like Gomamon and Joe, but rather dramatically mismatched. Where Ken is evil and Wormmon isn't, and Wormmon is spending his whole time trying to get Ken to go back to being good. That sort of dynamic does lead to a lot of abuse for Wormmon, which works in making me feel bad for him and sympathizing with him. But it also leads to some pretty good emotional scenes, which I think are very memorable, or actually maybe some of the most memorable parts of this season. So that's why I feel like Wormmon is an effective tool for helping Ken's character develop. Because it shows that Ken wasn't evil all the time, which can generate sympathy for him, and also further the mystery about Ken. And also I feel like it actually kind of helps Ken even after he becomes good. Because like I said, he becomes bland or blander. But one thing I always like to see during these parts is him being nice to Wormmon and also kind of being nice to his parents. Because he put these three through hell. So I'm glad to see Ken do this turnaround where all these people who he's wronged in the past, that only wanted the best for him. He's all of a sudden nice to them and he's happy. And Wormmon and his parents are happy because Ken's happy now. It's stuff like that that really makes me like Ken more and can kind of forgive more of the bland parts of his story. So I guess I'm just going to end it off with final thoughts about Ken, and then that'll be it. Ken to me was the entire reason the season was ever made. He's the one the show obviously cares most about and the one the writers like writing the most. He's got the most detailed backstory up till now. His arc takes up most of the show, and nearly everybody's plan revolves around Ken in some way. And that's good for Ken, but I just feel like there could have been more for everybody else, because in a show of 6 kids, you've got only one good character and one character that's okay, I guess, and then the other ones are just ranging from meh to utterly awful. But I guess if my biggest complaint of this character is that I wish other characters in the show were more like him, he's doing pretty good. Also, Ken was the first in a trend of good human villains. Because, like I said before, my favorite villains of this series are almost all human except for one exception. Because human villains typically have to have a reason why they turned evil or why they're fighting the humans, and there also has to be a story or something telling us why or how they got the amount of power they had that they can become a threat to the humans, which is always interesting. We've got another human villain in this season, but first we gotta talk about Blackboard Greymon, who we'll cover next time. So, good night. Hope you liked this episode about Ken. Hope it was everything you guys wanted and more.
It's not just fun, but you can't be here.